Continuing to talk about faith. We've talked about faith being objective, not subjective, having an object that you trust in. We talked about that object being God, which is revealed through creation or through Scripture, general revelation or special revelation. You're learning, you're gathering knowledge about God so that you can have faith in God. And so you've got an object. The more you learn about God, that object, the greater your faith is going to be. Now, we're going to look at a few words, one word in the Greek, 5 words in the Hebrew, that describe faith. How do you respond to God in these situations? In the Greek, the word is pistis. It's translated as belief or trust. It's translated as faith, but those are the two general meanings, belief and trust. It refers to confidence. The ideal of belief refers to the intellectual assent, meaning you acknowledge, you recognize the truth, you recognize the knowledge. There's sufficient evidence, you now believe. You have belief in this truth. Now understand, with that word pistis and belief, that's one side of it. The next side is going to be trust. Trust is going to be the area where you have reliance on it, commitment to this information. You can have the information and know that it's true. You can believe that it's true, but you're not going to trust it. A classic example of this comes in James chapter 2, verse 19. James talks a lot about faith, and we're going to address that in the next few lessons. But in James chapter 2, verse 19, James writes, "You believe that there is one God. Good. Even demons believe that and shudder." In other words, to have the knowledge that there is a God, to have a knowledge of God's character, that's the beginning of faith. That's belief. That's pistis being translated in the ideal of belief. But pistis, or faith, also involves trust. The demons have the intellect. They have the intellectual assent. They have the knowledge, but they're not going to trust it. They're not going to rely on it. They're not going to commit to that knowledge, that truth, that fact. Becoming a Christian is basically this idea. You have the knowledge, it's been tested, it's been gone through some kind of experience, and now you're going to have to decide. You know it's true. Are you going to trust it? That is within the word pistis. Belief, the intellectual assent, but also the trust in that knowledge you have. That is the word pistis, or what we have in the New Testament as faith. Demons have faith in the sense of belief, in the intellectual assent. But they do not have faith in the sense that they will trust it, rely on it, or commit to the truth. Now, going to the Hebrew in the Old Testament, we've got 5 verses, 5 different words. Because when you talk about faith, and this makes it very elementary for some people, because when you have faith, you always expect there's going to be a victory. There's always going to be deliverance. And the problem with that is our response to God's character, our response to God's nature of trusting God doesn't always mean we're going to face Goliath and have the victory. It always means we trust God and have the victory in Christ. But sometimes that victory, sometimes that the manifestation of our faith arrives in a variety of different ways. It can be very confusing for Christians. It can be very disheartening. It can be in the sense of unsettling when they do not understand these areas of faith and how it's applied in your life. First of all, Genesis 15:6, Abraham and God is giving Abraham a promise. God is giving Abraham a promise, but Abraham already knows God. Abraham is receiving a promise from God, a huge promise, but Abraham already knows God. He's not necessarily going to jump out there and believe the promise, but he's going to believe the Lord who gave him the promise. Here it is, Genesis 15:6. The word is amen. Abraham believed, that's the word, believed the Lord, and he credited it to him as righteousness. Amen means to prop, to support. It means to confirm, to stand firm. The idea here is when Abraham heard the promise, he was supported by God. He propped himself up against God. He knew God. He knew God's character. The promise, a little hard to hang on to, but he believed the Lord. He propped himself up on the Lord's character and trusted the promise, not because he understood the promise, but because he trusted, he understood God. In other words, he's got a certain amount of intellectual assent, a little bit of knowledge about this character of God. God gives him something bigger. It's like, whoa, I'll trust God for this promise. the word aman. It means to confirm, support, or prop up. Psalm 37:3. The word is batak. Batak. It's a confident trust expecting the deliverance. This is your victory word right here. The idea that you're going to face a situation, have faith in God, and have an expectant delivery. Here it is, basically Psalm 37:3, the word batak. Trust in the Lord and do good. Dwell in the land and enjoy safe pasture. The word batak is trust. Trust in the Lord and do good. In other words, you're trusting God. You're in a situation. You're going to continue to act according to God's plan, but you've got faith. You're trusting, knowing, expecting some kind of deliverance. It means to trust. It means to be bold. It means to be confident. It means to put. You're going to put this on God, knowing that there is going to be a victory. He's bringing the victory. It's a confident, an expectation of deliverance. It's different than just leaning on God, trusting that He's going to do this promise. You're now putting it on God, watching it affect, watching it manifest, watching the deliverance take place. That's Psalm 37:3. Psalm 57:1. The word is CHASAH. CHASAH. It means to flee. Watch this now. This is a situation where you're facing the giant, but you're not going to defeat the giant. This is not a matter of you having a promise and supporting yourself against God. This is you running to God. You do not hear the promise or understand the promise. You do not know you're going to defeat the giant. You're not even being told to defeat the giant. You do not understand anything. You're simply going to run and find shelter in God. You're not facing the giant. You're not trusting the promise. You're retreating and running to God. The word is CHASAH in the Hebrew. It means to flee for protection. Here it is. My God, have mercy on me, for in you I take refuge. I will take refuge in the shadow of your wings until the disaster has passed. I'm not going to defeat the disaster. I'm not going to understand the disaster. I'm just going to flee like a rabbit to the Lord and hide in the shelter of His wings, the shadow of His wings, until this situation has gone by. That is one of the appropriate responses of faith, is to run for shelter in the Lord until this confusing situation has passed by. Sometimes you lean on God. Sometimes you face the giant and expect victory. Sometimes you run for shelter in the Lord. These are the Hebrew words. CHASAH, it means to flee for protection, to seek refuge, to flee to shelter, to go aside, to go apart. Then we come to Job 13:15. This is where disaster is imminent. You're going to now perish. And that is part of it also. There's no victory. There's no promise. There's just the expectation and the knowledge that you're going to perish. Job says this, though he slay me, though God slay me, yet I will hope in Him. I will surely defend my ways to His face. Though He slay me, yet I will hope. The word is yakal. Yakal, it means to wait, to have hope, to waste time, to await expectantly, to be patient. You're not getting the deliverance, you're just waiting, and you're going, in a sense, you're going to defeat. Not trusting the promise, not seeing the victory, not running for refuge, but instead, if this is the end, if this is the way this all ends, I'm staying right here in my faith, trusting God. There's no deliverance. There's no understandable promise. There's no refuge until the storm passes. I'm going to be taken out by the storm. Though I perish, I'm still going to hope in God. That is the word yakal. It means to withstand. It means to be in that situation. It's another form, another thing God is going to expect you to do. When you have faith, these are the things He'll expect you to do. Sometimes you support yourself against God. Sometimes you put the problem on God. Sometimes you run to God for refuge. In this case, you just go through the situation knowing you're going to trust God in the midst of the disaster that's going to wipe you out. And the final word, very interestingly, in Isaiah 40:31, the word is kavah, kavah in the Hebrew. It says this, a verse you've heard, those who hope, kavah, those who hope in the Lord will renew their strength. They will soar on wings like eagles. They will run and not grow weary. They will walk and not faint. They will hope. Those who hope will have their strength renewed. They'll begin to gain momentum. And the word kavah, it originally meant to collect. It meant to gather for twisting or binding. It's the idea of taking small strings and tying them together, of twisting them together to take small strings, small fragments, and making a rope. Those who take one little bit at a time and keep twisting it together, you're waiting. The word means that when it comes into a translation, it means to wait for. It means to endure. It means to eagerly wait, expecting some kind of a deliverance. But this is in a sense of not going off and facing Goliath with the victory. This is a matter of taking one little moment at a time, twisting it, hoping, and taking one little promise, one little expectation, one moment of time, twisting it together, and eventually you're forming a rope. You start off weak, you start off with little, but you collect piece by piece, and eventually those who are weary are going to renew their strength. They're going to soar on wings like eagles. They'll run and not grow weary. They'll walk and not be faint, because you took one piece at a time and twisted it together. This is in a sense of collecting and building your faith into a rope that's going to help you hang on. In this case, not just hang on, you're flying like an eagle. You're running without growing weary, and you are not fainting. You're continuing on until the end. In other words, this now, God had the faith begin to manifest stronger and stronger each day. So those are 5 Hebrew words that give you 5 different views of how you will manifest faith. Sometimes it's in deliverance. Sometimes it's supporting yourself against God. Sometimes it's running to refuge. Sometimes it's being wiped out by the storm. Sometimes it's patiently building, strand by strand, piece by piece, a rope that's going to help you fly like an eagle and run and not get weary. We will have faith. But part of faith is understanding how to respond to God's nature. It's not always going to be the instantaneous magical victory that you expect. It's not always going to be magic. It's going to be a response to God's character. And to respond to God's character, you're going to have to know the different ways of responding and the ways He's going to have you live your life, a life of faith. We live by faith, not by sight. And by living by faith, sometimes you run for refuge. Sometimes you support yourself against God, not fully understanding the promise. Sometimes you see clearly and you step out and expect victory. Sometimes you're wiped out by the storm. You don't see any victory, but you continue to live by faith. Sometimes piece by piece you build your faith, but you're going to have belief in information, an intellectual assent, and then you're going to trust that information to manifest these characteristics in your life as a believer in God, in a believer in Jesus Christ.